So welcome everybody to the NEBP Tech Troubleshooting Call. This is on ground stations and Iridium pointing. And we will start out with the masters, Randy, and the students in Montana.
So I want to show you one thing first. You see the LEDs on the Iridium unit? Can you tell which ones are on?
See if I can spotlight you just a moment.
All right, there we go. So notice which ones are on. There's a power button. There's an Iridium LED and a GPS LED and a status. So right now we've had this on. If you log into the tracking website, either eclipse.rci.montana.edu, borealis.rci.montana.edu, you will see this modem in Bozeman, Montana. Its IMEI number, the last four digits are 6810. So you want to make sure that you have all of that going before you try to start the ground station. And so I'm going to turn it over to Zach.
A quick question, Randy, and that is, I saw those lights were on and they were not flashing. So is that the idea? They should all be on, solid on?
If you read the data sheet on the Iridium, it will tell you that Iridium is going to flash sometimes. Okay, and sometimes it'll flash so fast that you can't see it. And that's when it's communicating with the Iridium satellite. So I would review the data sheet for the 9602 LP and just verify that. I'm gonna run this down here.
Perfect. Yep.
Okay.
Okay. Hi there.
So anyway, one more time, make sure those lights are on before you Before you turn on the ground station, correct?
Yes, yes. And then I'm going to be taking you guys over the user interface for the ground system or the ground station system, which includes Brad, and then checking the website for the Iridium pings. So I'm going to get a screen share going here, which you guys should be able to see now.
And you are Zach or you are Gino?
I am Zach. I am one of the electrical engineers down here. Can you guys see the screen here?
We can see your screen. There's nothing on it yet.
Can you see this Zoom meeting page with Google Chrome?
Yeah. Yep.
Perfect. All right. So as he was saying before, you are going to want to have the MSU Borealis tracking page up, which you can see the URL up top, which is borealis.rci.montana.edu/tracking, which this you're going to be able to make sure that your Iridium is actually pinging with the satellite, which as we can see here, we are checking our IMEI number, which is 6810. You got to make sure that matches the actual Iridium you have, or else you're going to be tracking somebody else's balloon here.
So Zach, can you, in the Zoom call, can you open up the chat?
Yes.
And the reason I suggest that is that people are dropping things in the chat, presumably because they want to talk to you.
I see. Banana belt temperatures.
That was a while ago.
Is that requirement for the light to be on before turning on the tracking station a new thing?
No, it's not.
Okay.
You can turn on the tracking station, but you can't start tracking until those lights are there.
Okay.
But it doesn't matter the order that you turn them on. Great question, Paul.
Let me minimize this here. All right, so the next thing we're going to open up is this main exe file, which is the Brad software. Which here you'll see it pulled up. I'm going to minimize this here. Perfect. And I'll keep an eye out for chats. And if I do miss one, please just let me know. So this, you do have to follow a certain order for setting up which one you confirm first. And I'll go over that here. So first we're going to start off with getting our IMEI number. Actually, here, we should probably go over the actual hardware of the tracking station. All right, so first thing first, when you guys are getting the ground station set up, you want to make sure you have your laptop here, have your cables that go to your ground station over Yeah, that'd be awesome. And let me know if you guys have problems seeing stuff here. But you're gonna have your two cables hooked up to your tracking station, which is your power cable, and then your communication cable, which should be labeled, and then your actual tracking station with the dish hooked up. This
So,
is not
Zach,
Yep.
two things. One is, can you stop sharing because then we'll see you better. And second thing is make sure you speak up when you're not really close to the mic.
Oh, is this attached to here?
Yeah.
Can you hear me better now?
Oh, we're hearing you okay. Just make sure you speak up and also stop sharing your screen until you're going to be using the software.
Yes. Sorry, I did not know I was minimized there. All right, is this better here?
Yep.
Yeah, this is good.
Yeah, so with your ground station hooked up with your power cable and then your communication cable, which you guys should already have, it doesn't really matter what orientation this ground station is pointed at initially, because you're going to be lining this up with the sun using either a shadow or an alternative, which I will bring up when we get the actual software pulled up. And do you guys have any questions about the physical setup of the ground station? I think that is a no. Perfect. It's from Perfect. Now I'm going to get back on the screen share here. Perfect. This is showing up good for you guys?
Yep.
Perfect. All right, so this is the Brad station tracking software, which we're going to start out with our IMEI number of our Iridium system, which can be found on the side of it. It'll be labeled with a sticker, which you can usually just put the last four numbers of your IMEI number to implement it, which I'm just going to confirm by going to the RCI website, which we have the last four digits of 6810. Then you're going to want to make sure you press confirm IMEI when you're done with that. And then you have this little status box. Sorry, let me move myself out of the way.
So make sure your mics are muted unless you're in a very, very quiet place and unless you're talking. Thank you.
So then if you check on your status box down here, you should see your IMEI number pop up and then the coordinates it has, just confirming that has been selected, balloon selected. Then our next step here is you're going to want to make sure you have the right COM port selected. Sometimes it will show up as another one, which you could just go to your serial port and check and see which one is connected, and then press connect to Arduino, which again, it'll show you in your status box that it has been connected to your actual base station over there. So I need to move myself again. All right, there we go. So then after you connected that Arduino, you're going to want to go over here and set your ground station latitude, longitude, and altitude, which I usually use Google Maps and put a ping exactly on my location here to get the most precise coordinates. But any other method that you want to use, like Maps or Waze or some sort of just Google search, that might also work as well. But you want to make sure you're precise with this.
Can't you just do that with a phone app where your phone knows where it is?
You can, but I found that the altitude is off when you use like the Compass app, and yeah, I think the Compass one also shows your coordinates, but it has been a little bit off for me. So I prefer to just set my ping manually on Google Maps.
Okay, I'm surprised by that only because when I use Google Maps, I find the altitude is very often pretty much off, and that's just because they don't know the altitude.
Yes, yes, I do not use the altitude on Google Maps. I will go over what I use when I get there. But for the latitude and longitude, I do use Google Maps, which I am at 45. 6645 801, which you usually don't need to go that far into significant digits, but it is always useful. 111.065.5.3.
And then for my altitude,
These are all decimal degrees, correct?
yes. And then so here for my altitude, I'm actually going to go over to the RCI website and check and see where the Iridium base plate is at, which it does look to be at 1,500 meters, which we'll just put in here, 1,500. I think it was point. We are 1498.4. 1498.4. And then we're going to set our ground station location, which again, you'll see in the status box, entered successfully. Our next thing is our position according to the sun, which this is where it can get tricky if it's a cloudy day like we have here, which here, Gino, can I have you? All right, I am going to stop screen sharing for a second, but we're doing the position of the sun. All right, can you guys see me good here?
Yep.
Randy, can I have you spin it? Perfect. All right, so coming over to the base station. So we have a general idea of where the sun is at, which should be, I don't know which cardinal direction, but it is up over there, which we're going to want to get. Can you spin this 180 for me, please?
So you want to walk us through what you would do if it was sunny, and then separately what you would do if it's not sunny?
Yes, absolutely. Make sure it's on. Yeah, all right. So if this is a sunny day, if it is a sunny day, yeah. We gotta find a good spot to film this. So if it is a sunny day, you're going to want to point your dish as close to the center of the sun as you can, which to do that, you're going to use the shadow off of the antenna of your dish.
And when you say point the dish, is this manually or are you tweaking it?
We're using the pan and tilt
Right here.
to basically
Mhm.
position it.
Pan clockwise, pan counterclockwise, which I will go over once I get back on the screen share. And then can you go up about 20 clicks? Which, yes, I will go over and describe all of the inputs that we're doing on there when I get back to that screen share. All right, yeah, stop it right there for a sec. So I don't know if you guys can see this, but we have a little bit of a shadow on our dish that's getting cast over this, which, how does it, oh, can you see the zoom? Which I don't know if you guys can see that there, that little circle.
Pretty subtle.
It's very subtle.
Yes, since it's a cloudy day out here today, but like if it's a bright sunny day, you're going to see that very clear. And you just want to make sure it is as lined up as it can be with equal margin around that circle there. And on cloudy days like this, you're going to want to use some secondary app, which on the spot, we found out that we use a Skyview app, which shows you the position of the sun, and you can sort of align your phone, which I'll actually pull this up here. I use this Skyview Light app, which when it was cloudy during the eclipse, let's turn it this way here. You can actually do a search, do the sun, and this might work with other apps as well, but I've had the most success, which I don't know if you could see here. It has the trajectory of the sun, and then its actual position right there and where it's going to be, which what we did, which was not too precise, but a good last second decision to do, is basically line your phone up as directly as you can, and then try to make it almost parallel with the front of your dish, this little circular object here. And then once you get that aligned to the best of your abilities, I'm going to take it over here onto the software. Here, actually, do you guys have any questions about that first before I move forward?
Does this work if the sun is below the horizon?
Yes, it did. So at the partial eclipse, it was actually behind a mountain range below the horizon, which if you just get it lined up with your sky tracking app or your Skyview app, it will still act as if the sun is out.
So when you first set down your ground station tripod, you pay no attention to the sun or to north or anything?
Well, yes, you do need to know where the sun is at, but a lot of the times when you're starting in the morning, you will not be able to see the sun. This is very bad. You will not be able to see the sun since it is below the horizon. But you do want to, so say you're by some buildings, you do want to make sure you're far away and the sun is not going to be coming up behind them for just ease of use.
So I'm asking lots of questions in part because I'm never at the ground station on my team, ever.
Yes,
But
absolutely.
I thought, I was told by my students that they had to set up their tripod to make sure one of the legs was pointing north. Didn't seem like you did that at all.
No. So we literally just plopped the tripod out here, made sure it was level, which also is not 100% needed, but it just makes sure you're not going to tip over your base station. But yeah, you want to make sure it's level, and that is about it for your tripod.
And there is a level on each, a bubble level on each ground station that you can use. And you can see ours is off a little bit today, but you want to be kind of particular about that and get it centered. It'll make the beam of the antenna reliable and pointing to the payload.
Yes. Any other questions about setting up it pointing towards the sun?
Can you read the questions in the chat to us, James?
Sure. I haven't been watching it, but I do have it open. So,
Here we go. Would you suggest using getting altitude? If you're not.
so here's a question from Mishra. If one of the LEDs turn off, should we restart tracking once it turns back on?
Oh, I see here. Yeah, we gotta go up a little bit further.
No. Once you verified that the Iridium is on our website and tracking, it's good, and the LEDs will come and go as it tries to preserve power, because it doesn't transmit all the time. It transmits to the Iridium network in bursts, and so that LED will kind of burst.
So there's a question about what would you suggest for getting altitude if you're not setting up in the same location where you're launching?
Yep.
In other words, where your Iridium is located. Your Iridium is located in town A and your ground station is in town B.
It looks like the next comment, Jesse has something that he's recommending.
Okay.
I would try that.
Yep, and then you could also go old school with pulling up a topography map and actually getting the altitude that way. It's way less accurate, but I would suggest going on a website that has the known altitudes around that location. And then,
So another question about, do we have to ensure it's level? And you've already answered, it's a good idea to be as level as possible. I personally like the fact that you don't maybe have to orient it in a specific direction with respect to north. You can orient it so that you can get the best contact with the ground.
yes,
Correct.
yes. It's exclusive to my system, not Brad.
So Jesse has a different system, and he'll talk a bit about that in a minute, but be a little careful about Jesse's advice. It may not be the best advice for Brad. He's talking from his experience with his system.
Yes.
And he's talking about north pointing, not sun pointing. Okay, we'll hear more from Jesse about that a little bit later.
I tried seeing the pan and tilt motors weren't working because when you tried setting it to the sun position, it wouldn't move. So we actually have that issue when we're testing if the Iridium is too close to the tracking station. So I'm not sure how far away your Iridium base plate was, but make sure when you're testing that it is further away than, I don't know, 50 yards.
Yeah. In airborne mode, the GPS is not accurate. So there's a big ring. If you zoom in on the tracking website, you can see how far off the pings are based on airborne mode. It's not down to the foot or anything like that. It's a big ring. And so if you're trying to test this with the Iridium close to the ground station, it may look like it's not pointing at it, but the further away you get, it's going to be pointing directly at the Iridium.
Yes, and Matt is saying in chat that for if you have an Android phone, the GPS location works well.
Okay,
so you can use
perfect.
that. And then, all right, I see your comment there, Jesse.
Go back to the software.
Yep. All right, I'm going to get my screen share back on. Let's untangle these cables.
So I have a question for you guys right now. Where is your Iridium? Is it 50 yards or farther away from you?
Where did you put the Iridium?
It's on top of the horse trailer.
Yes, so
See the horse trailer?
No?
It's
Okay,
that rusty, it's the rusty trailer.
yes.
okay.
All right, perfect. Let me get this screen share scrolling again. Screen. All right, is that up and working for you guys?
Yep.
Perfect. Okay, so for the movement of your base station, you have these controls here, your tilt up, tilt down, pan counterclockwise, and pan clockwise, which this little drop down menu here is how much you actually want to turn it. We have it on 10 clicks to move it a bunch, but once you get close to that sun position, you're going to want to knock it down to 1 to 0.5 to get very precise measurements in on it. All right, we should be good with all of our lat, long, and altitude. And is that lined up with the sun over there?
So Randy, why don't you take a look at the question in the chat? It's pretty long. Maybe you can distill it.
Once it, I gotta pull this up a little bit. Once it works. Start tracking.
And generally speaking, I mean, these are technical calls, and this is good. On the other hand, if there's something funny about your system, it's possible that Montana might say, you know, let's talk about that separately rather than with the whole group, because that's not a general problem. That seems to be a problem specific to your.
So tell me what you mean by we called the MSU server.
Lily, can you clarify? You can unmute yourself.
Sorry. So I'm not really sure because I wasn't the one that called, but this was like a concurrent problem, and it seemed like it was happening to other people where it would like lose tracking whenever like you would start it up, and then we would have to like manually track it and move the dish. So it wasn't tracking it. It would, as soon as you hit tracking, it would go back, and then we tried this. We called the server somehow. I wasn't the one that called, so I'm not sure exactly what happened, but it fixed it somehow. And then it was working for a little bit, and then it started doing it again the more times we tested it.
So by call, you mean you got somebody on the phone?
I think so. I think it was one of my other coaches. I don't think she's on this call, but I honestly am not 100% sure.
So I would encourage you after today to take it out and work with it more. And when you're reporting a problem like that, as many of the details that you can provide is useful. Yes, this software will crash occasionally, and yes, you might have to restart it. But we have found overall that it's very reliable and accurate in pointing once you have it all set up. And I don't know if you went through the exact position or the exact step that Zach has been describing. There is a button to go back and look at the sun to see if you're still calibrated. Sometimes if it's not getting video, we'll repoint it at the sun. And if it's off, we'll go ahead and recalibrate again during a flight to get it to come back in. Remember, the angle for this dish is only a few degrees. I think it's like 6 degrees in horizontal and 6 in the vertical. So it doesn't take much of a deviation for it to be out of the band of the dish receiving from the payload. But if you want to send this in an email, we'll be happy to work with you and look at it.
Will do. We'll try it again. We tried it yesterday and we couldn't even get it to go. So we'll try putting the Iridium farther out and then try it again.
Perfect.
Sweet. Thank you.
You bet.
All right, so continuing on. So those were your controls there. You have your pan clockwise, counterclockwise with different degrees per click. And then once you get that centered as close as you can to the sun, you're going to want to do calculate starting position, which will take it off of the ground station and bring it over into the software, which once you have that calculated, you're going to want to set your starting position, which you'll see in the status box, successfully calibrated. Make sure we're not getting comments. Perfect. So now that we have that set, we should be good to start basic tracking.
So quick question, when you say calculate starting position, does the dish move? Is it supposed to move and now point at the iridium instead of pointing at the sun?
Nope. So when you do calculate starting position, that's just pulling what position it's pointed at that moment. So that's why you want to get it calibrated as close to the sun so it could pull that over into this software to get ready to track.
So that's almost the same as save this as your starting position, something like that?
Yes. Yes, that is exactly. And then you're going to want to make sure you press set starting position so it actually saves it in the software. So now it should be good to start basic tracking, which all you're going to have to do is press this button down here. And so I'm going to start tracking and then stop screen sharing, which you see in the status box, it is tracking, which you can see we are slowly pointing towards our trailer with the Iridium pen, which, as you can see, it is going the correct direction. Slowly making its way over, and it should pan down. Perfect. Yep, so it's locked onto it now. It's doing some slight movements, which
Walk it around.
yes, that'd be awesome. So Randy's actually going to go walk this around, and we should see it moving with him. I'm going to bring you guys behind it, get a better idea of what is going on here.
So if you do clicks, right, you click up or you click sideways, does it remember and just adds that as an offset to all subsequent calculations?
Yes, so there's actually a button. Oh, it's a new comment. All right, no. Sorry, I was looking at the comments there. Can you please repeat that?
When you do clicks, does it remember what you've done so that it just says, oh, you just need to always be 4 clicks higher than what I thought? So in other words, it's a cumulative sort of thing.
Are you talking about when it's tracking?
Well, okay, so here's what I could imagine. Right now, what if it's not pointing at the trailer, but it's close, and so can you click it to the side until it is pointing at the trailer, even right now, just to adjust what apparently was a calibration offset of some sort?
I believe that will take it out of tracking mode if you are using the manual controls. What you're going to want to do if that does happen is recalibrate with the sun, make sure you're as close as possible, and then retry your tracking. What have you guys found to be the largest distance that you can set up away from the Iridium? The largest distance? I would have to ask Randy for that exact. Where did Randy go? Hey, Randy, I got a question for you here. And so let me show you guys here what actually just went down first. He was over by that trailer, and we do have tracking here. And let me go over James's question quick about the manually tabs on the way. So yeah, we are in tracking mode right now. You do not. Uh-oh. A sec here. Yeah, hey, make sure the radios are pointed. Perfect. Randy, what is the maximum distance you can have your Iridium pan away from your base station? Infinite?
Yeah.
He is saying infinite.
No, that actually makes sense because again, quite often, sometimes anyway, you might have your ground station in a different town, a different county. So in other words, it's certainly not in view.
Right. Remember that the Iridium is satellite based. So I could track on James's Iridium from Montana if I so chose. It all depends on the IMEI number that you put in as to what it's going to pull from the database. And the database is getting all of the data from NAL when it transmits to our database. And this program goes to our database and pulls out where the balloon is actually at. So it can be anywhere. Does that answer the question?
Yes, thank you.
And then back on your question about manually adjusting while it's tracking, it will account for that and it will still track while you do the manual commands in. All right, so now let's say that our system is off, we're not getting a good lock or tracking on it, and we want to go recalibrate with the sun. Let me get a screen share going here.
So actually, before you do this,
Yep.
it seems to me, but this might not be an option in your software, that if I know where the thing is located, a better approach is just manually type in the location and tell it point at this location. Forget the sun. I'm not interested in the sun. I'm interested in the payload. But is that a possibility? Or that's
is
not
not.
built into Brad? Because I think it is built into Jesse's software.
I think you can enter in the positions manually, but we actually use a sun chart that the Air Force has out to grab the position of the sun and where it's going.
And that apparently works well, maybe even better for you. That's okay.
Yeah, I think there's multiple ways to do this.
Yep.
It's just all which is more repeatable, which is easy to do, and which whatever gives us the desired result, right, of keeping that payload within the 12 degrees total of the antenna.
But if you shift back to the sun, by definition, for a while, you will not be in touch with your balloon.
That's correct.
Okay.
Any more questions before I move on to this?
If you click that return to sun position, it will slew towards what it thinks is the sun.
Yes.
And then how do you get it back to the balloon? Hit start tracking again?
Yeah, so I'm gonna hit stop tracking here, and if I want to go calibrate it, I'll stop that really quick. And then I'll do return to sun position. And then the same thing as before, I'm just gonna manually pan up, pan down, or pan left, pan right, or tilt up, tilt down to get that starting position as close as possible.
So it's going back to the sun right now.
Yes.
So return to sun position, and then you pan, and then you set starting position.
No,
So
you'll want to do so.
Freeze that, and then you go back to tracking. Is that true?
No, so when you do the stop tracking, you get it back to sun position, you do your pans, and then you have to press calculate starting position first to
Got it.
pull the actual degree measurements off of the motors, and then do set starting position.
It actually gets it from the website. There's nothing in here.
It does. It gets it from the website, sorry. But yeah, you want to do calculate starting position and then set start position. So once
Okay. So a couple comments that are in the chat that I think haven't been looked at, maybe.
I see the. Yep.
Could you take Larry's and then take Lily's?
Launch. No.
I think Larry's is not really a question, but do you agree with the statement?
I
This
can't
points
see
to
it.
whatever the last position on the Iridium is. Unit is on, and it will point to the previously known position.
Yes, that's absolutely true. Remember, the database is what holds all the positional data for your balloon. And if the battery comes out of your Iridium, if something is interfering with your antennas, and you have a 2 or 3 minute dead spot with no data, it's going to point to the last previously known position. Yes.
And then I haven't looked at the forums.
I can't answer the forum question either.
Lily, I have a question. When you talk about the updated one that's in the forums, are you referring to Hermes? Because Hermes is not, it does what Brad does sort of, but these guys are not talking about Hermes at all. My student Jesse will talk about Hermes at least a little bit in a few minutes.
I don't think there's any software updates on the forum, right?
For Brad.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm not sure who the link was from, but it was in one of them about the Iridium, and I think it was some other person. I don't know who it was from though. And it was just a way to stream the video, the RFD, and this.
Oh, that's not us. I think that's Minnesota.
Well,
Okay.
Maine has software for streaming. We're not talking about streaming today. We're just talking about pointing right now.
Well, yeah,
Mhm.
she asked about though the RFD streaming, that it did it all together.
That
I
probably
think-
is Hermes, which is a Minnesota version of this product. Yep.
And you'll hear about that in a minute.
Okay.
Are there any other questions regarding the user interface here or setting up the ground station?
What should you be watching for? Let's assume the balloon is out of sight, so you can't tell for sure if it's really pointing at it or not. What should you watch on the screen as evidence that it's working or as evidence that it's not working so well?
You want to watch the bars on the Iridium or on the Ubiquity radio and see how many bars are lit up on the LEDs. We don't have the Iridium radio on here today, but you could hand point this if you watch those LEDs because it's a signal strength indicator. And so you basically very carefully point things until you get the maximum signal strength and then try to follow it by hand. You can do that.
Is it prudent or not prudent to try to improve the signal strength with your clicks?
Yeah, that's what we did.
Yeah, you can do that. You just have to do a real fine control, and honestly, I think, what is the smallest size? 0.1?
It was 0.5. So at the partial eclipse, we had the same problem as we were using half eclipse, and then you can also do it manually by hand, the tiniest bit if you really need the fine turns.
I think Sheaf has a version that takes it down to 0.1 or 0.01.
I've heard of this stuff.
And he swears by that. So anything else?
See if there's any comments. All right, I do not see anything else. That is a rundown of our Brad system and ground station there.
Shall we stop there, James, and let Jesse talk about yours?
Sure. And so Jesse's on, and Jesse, I would encourage you to be quick and focus in particular on things that are different. As in, it does many of the same things, but notice that I'm able to take in multiple input streams. For instance, that's one thing that's different. And I think you point it or set it up somewhat differently. You don't have to go through all the details. They can certainly ask you if they want details, but why don't you just give us a quick rundown of some of the things that your system does in particular that are different from Brad, because I think more people use Brad and some people are trying to use Hermes.
Yeah, so I don't know if anyone here has any experiences ever tried to use Hermes or anything. I put it out on the forums, but I don't know if many people know about it. But I'll just briefly run through the startup procedure if I can find my window. Yeah, there we go. So I'll just show you what you're supposed to do on flight day to get it tracking and pointing. Don't need to deep dive into all the features that can be addressed later, but this is what it looks like. You can all see that, right?
We can see it.
Okay, perfect. So first thing you want to do once you have your ground station set up, did mention a little bit confusion earlier, sun pointing versus north pointing. North pointing is specific to Hermes, and that was added in lieu of sun pointing, just because we had a couple issues in the past where there was intense cloud cover and we couldn't really see a shadow on the dish. So we instead have it set up so to calibrate the dish before you actually start pointing or anything, you just physically orient it directly north, like you have the dish facing north, and then you have it level, as in parallel to the ground. And then once that's done, then Hermes knows that's the 0, 0 position for my heading like coordinate scheme. So connecting to Iridium, I don't have a drop-down menu or anything. You just type in or paste the IMEI, or you just have it memorized like I do. So assuming you do that, no typos. Oh, I already made a typo. Sorry about that. 2, 3, 4, 6.
So you put in the IMEI number manually in the box right underneath connections.
Yep, and you can paste it as well. Yeah, you don't have to memorize it. That would have be. But yeah, then you just press enter to submit that in the box. Then just click on the radio, and you can see it works. You have the location displaying, you have the coordinates, you have the altitude. That's how you know your Iridium is on and tracking. And then you can take a look at this.
Slow down. Where on the screen are you seeing these things?
Oh, you don't see my cursor, do you?
I do see your cursor, but you're talking too fast.
Sorry about that. Yeah, so down here is all the location data, bottom right. So I have the altitude on this altimeter here. I have some coordinates on this display. And then I also have OpenStreetMap data showing what town or county in this case that you're in. So you can just do a little bit of a sanity check on that. You can, just because it might be that you haven't turned the Iridium on yet, or it's not connected to the internet yet. So it's fetching old data from old flights, as it is in this case. This is from when we were in New Mexico, of course. So you just want to make sure that you're seeing the right town or the right county to know that you're receiving current and continuously updating Iridium information. And then as far as the other radios,
can you tell on the screen that it is current data or something like a timestamp from the data, a date stamp, anything like that?
well, you'd see these coordinates fluctuating a tiny bit. I do have a timestamp in my code. It does save the timestamp. It just doesn't do anything with it. But I could, yeah, that'd be a good thing for a future update. Maybe put something up in this blank space, just saying like last ping received. Also, throughout the flights, just a bit of advice, pay attention to these indicators, especially this Wi-Fi one. Sometimes I have it where the dish just stops tracking it altogether, and it takes me a while to realize that I lost Iridium momentarily. So that can be because you'll lose internet for whatever reason, and you'll know if this this icon here goes dark. So you need that if you want to be tracking Iridium.
I think time since last ping would be useful.
Yeah, okay. I'll get that added in the next update.
So I don't have to keep looking at my clock and its clock, but rather I can just see, wait a minute, that's data from 3 weeks ago, or that's data from 3 minutes ago, or 3 seconds ago.
Oh yeah, and good question as far as geographic versus magnetic north. That I should make that clear. That would be geographic north, which can make things a little bit difficult with compasses. But that's just the way I have it set up with my math conversions. Geographic north does help it.
On the other hand, if you have a handheld GPS, and you may, just to help you find
Mhm.
things, it's easy to find geographic north by just walking with your handheld and keeping that one number the same, and just walk farther and farther away, and you will eventually end up due north of where you started from.
Yep. So when you do that, let's just assume you're only tracking with Iridium. You can add RFD and APRS if you want, but we're used to single radio, and that just makes things a little simpler for the purpose of explaining. So what you can do after you have your ground station in the 0, 0 position and you're ready to start tracking, once you have your Arduino plugged in, you just click this right here. I don't have it plugged in right now, but if you do, it'll go green once it establishes the serial connection, and then you know that your ground station is communicating with Hermes. And then at that point, you'll have full control of the stepper motors. So you can press the center button right here. And in that case, it would immediately start tracking. It would follow the Iridium or whatever aggregate combination of radio information. It would tell the dish to point at what it believes is the payload coordinates. And so right there on the ground, assuming you are launching from the same place as your payload, you can do a little reasonability check. You can see, is the dish pointing at the payload in general or the Iridium box or whatever? And if for whatever reason you're unhappy with it, if it's a little off, then you can add some tweak, which the software will remember. You can use these arrows here. You can do some keys on your keyboard, joystick, any manual input. You can add tweak, and then you'll see it down here underneath the D-pad. The tweak angles, which will be added to the calculated angles and then summed up for these angles you see on the edges here. That's what will actually get fed into the ground station.
So a question on the screen, I think I see the latitude and longitude, but not altitude in the same place anyway, of what I'm pointing at. But do I see anywhere on the screen of where it thinks I am located? Is that on the screen here anywhere?
It's in the settings menu, and you see that when you actually enter And sorry, I skipped a step. You actually need to do this before connecting or before at least tracking with the Arduino, but this is where you'd enter your tracker information. So using the same process as you would with Brad, use your favorite map tool to find your latitude and longitude. You can use the website or whatever else to find your altitude, enter that in, but you can see down here underneath, it shows what it believes to be its current information. And if you want to do manual input, whether on the ground or in flight, you can just uncheck that box there, and then you have control of these as well. But then all the information is displayed under there.
So payload, lat long, altitude, that's where the balloon is. Tracker, is that where the ground, is that what you mean, ground station?
Yes, ground station.
Okay.
And so, for instance, if I were to enter some random coordinates like, 10 degrees, you'd see that updated right there. And then at that point, you're pretty much ready to fly. I mean, once you have Arduino, once you have that box light up green, and once you have this actively tracking, then the dish will point automatically. You can do manual input if you want. You can add tweak, but that's pretty much all you have to do to get live tracking of your balloon. Everything else is just extra features. So yeah, that was a little bit of a brief rundown on the setup procedure. Any questions about that or anything else?
So I actually have a question, and that is, you pointed out how to do tracking if you are tracking with Iridium.
Mhm.
Okay. On the other hand, you have a button there that says APRS. So does that what? Pull
So
a website and try to pull down APRS information?
yes, you have to enter the call sign, and just whatever ham radio you have. I mean, you have a lot of call signs, of course, just depending on what units we're using on what boxes, you get to choose the specific APRS unit. And then when it comes to RFD, you'd have to have the receiver plugged in. That's also a serial connection like Arduino, but you'd have to have that plugged into your computer to connect to that.
So most people have their RFD plugged into a specific serial monitor to watch the numbers go past and to maybe record them. But what you've done is you've circumvented that or grabbed it and just said, okay, no, plug your RFD into me instead. Is that fair to say?
That's right. And it still records all the same data. If I just go into the function in my code, you can see everything still gets pulled the same way. The data row is saved. Everything is displayed like in the separate GUI, which is used to display RFD data.
Last question for me for now, and that is, what if you click all of them, RFD and Iridium and APRS, which one does it use?
So I have a filtering system which uses a combined aggregate, sort of like a Kalman filter, but it essentially knows that Iridium is the most accurate, but it's also the least frequent. So it uses RFD and APRS to supplement it. It also throws out bad data. So like if the other radios are nowhere close, then it's not the same flight, and it'll ignore it. But assuming you have radio pings coming from within reasonable proximity of each other, then they'll be combined into a filter, and then the RFD and the APRS can be used to help predict the next Iridium ping or where that would be. And then if you don't have Iridium, you could do like RFD and APRS, basically any combination of the three, and it'll do its best.
Questions from other people who've been using it or people who are curious about it?
You see that Hermes is flight ready. Yeah, there were a lot of things being tweaked last semester, but we have used this on several flights to date. We've had success with it, especially in the pointing. A lot of what was being tweaked was extra features like vent commanding and whatnot, but in the past few flights, I found pointing to be perfectly reliable. But when it comes to like,
Have you ever done a head-to-head with Brad, as in try Brad and try this right next to each other and just see whether or not they're doing the same thing?
well, I'd need 2 ground stations for that. And we do have 2 ground stations, but it's not like I could just unplug Brad, plug in Hermes, because it would have to go through all the calibration steps again. Wouldn't be practical in real time.
Okay. There were some questions I heard on audio. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to ask about Ubiquity. Is that part working?
Somewhat. So these 3 at the beginning, RFD, Iridium, APRS, those are the 3 tracking radios. And then Ubiquity, as you'll know if you've been doing video streaming, that's just for getting the video down to the ground. That's what relies on line of sight. So if you have a stream IP address, which you can input right there, then yes, it will connect to Ubiquity and you will see the camera feed in this window, but the frames will be really slow. It'll struggle to process it. It's it's definitely a proof of concept and very much a work in progress feature. So I wouldn't recommend using that on an actual flight. It would definitely throw a wrench into whatever else you're doing with pointing. But it is being worked on, and I'm trying to get it ready before the eclipse.
So Randy was talking about Ubiquity bars. Do you see on your screen the bars in Ubiquity, or you just have Ubiquity as either on or off, sort of?
Yeah, I tried to get the bars into Hermes, but I wasn't able to pull that information just because it doesn't come from a website. It comes from a gateway, and that has all sorts of protections and firewalls and a bunch of stuff I don't understand. So best I can do, at least for now, is just showing whether Ubiquity is connected or not.
That's a challenge for everybody, though, is to keep your eye on those bars. In particular, they're not always that easy to see, especially if you're sitting at the ground station. At least that's my impression.
Right, and if it's a challenge to see the actual bars on the physical Ubiquity modem, that's when you can go into the gateway and see it digitally. That's just not something I can tell the code to pull out of the gateway.
So Larry has in the chat, where do you tell this program which COM port?
Yeah, so it actually auto detects it. It took a while to set that up, but I also have a safeguard just in case auto detect isn't working, plan for every contingency or set a contingency for every point of failure. And so you can enter them manually if you'd like. I have them as 3 and 6 by default, but that'll be different for people. I feel like that's sort of a common COM port to see, but make sure you know what your COM port is. And before a flight, just to be absolutely sure, make sure you have it entered in manually. Otherwise, it will auto detect, which will probably work, but no promises.
So if you're using RFD, you're using 2 COM ports, you're using an Arduino COM port for sure, and an RFD COM port perhaps. Is that fair?
That's right. And they have to be different.
Yep. We'll have another of these calls about sending commands to Iridium and stuff like that, but you have set up Hermes so you can actually send cut commands, venting commands through the ground station itself.
That's right.
Have you tried that on a flight?
We did try it on a flight. I remember the first time we tried it, we overloaded the Iridium unit and I think crashed some server or something. If that affected anything in Montana, sorry about that, but I've since fixed the issue and I've had plenty of successful tests on the ground since then. So I have every reason to believe that it would work perfectly fine in a flight.
So the commands that you send to do cut down and vent open and vent close and any of those other commands that you've all developed, they don't come to Montana State. They go to NAL, to their server. And
Right.
it's
To the SVD
NAL
email.
It's NAL that actually sends it up to the Iridium satellite and then back down to the Iridium modem. All we're doing is detecting pin states and then sending it via XB throughout the payloads to do whatever the commanded function is.
But
Okay, so I just caused problems for NAL, not you.
But we have found, and I think other teams maybe have found inadvertently, that if you send too many commands, bad things happen. You can overrun the buffer, you can freeze up the system. Maybe it's at the NAL side, but you need to send commands judiciously, and you shouldn't send 100 commands in a row because they only can keep 99 of them in mind.
You can also monitor how many commands are in the queue, which is what we do.
Mm-hmm.
We watch to make sure that the commands are getting through. The service that we have only sends emails when Iridium has clearance to send them. It's not deterministic. So you can't have anything that's timed based on the emails. And I think Mary's going to check into that for us to see how much it's going to cost us to go to a deterministic system. But this is kind of like a NASA mission, right? Where you have a giant delay going to another planet and you got to kind of figure out how to deal with it.
That's true.
Right.
Which is why I have automatic just in case you have issues on the ground.
Yeah.
Not tested extensively, discllaimer.
But I think, Jesse, you overflowed that queue inadvertently on 2
I
flights
did.
in a row. And so
Yeah, I ended up sending like 100 emails.
Overflowing the queue is a really bad idea.
Yeah, because it takes a long time to work through the queue once you have 100 emails in there.
So there's something in the chat that says from Lily, where in the forum is it? I assume that means Hermes. And what does the link look like? And does it lead to software or is there code somewhere else? Can you give some idea of if someone wants to look into this, what's the first step?
So I haven't posted in the forum in a long time, but I do have this documentation and changelog, which I am updating. This is sort of the one-stop shop for my software. So let me just grab the share link for this, put it in the chat. I should make another forum post soon, but this is where you can download it. I have the link right there, along with a changelog, or just at the bottom showing what's been going on recently. So there you go.
I would suggest that you do make a specific forum entry, reminding people, telling people where to learn, where to read about Hermes, and your contact information if they have questions.
Okay.
And then Jesse, I'm curious. So we track our pin states on a different website. Do you have a way on your actual application here that monitors what state your vent is at and such?
Not yet, but that's in the pipeline. I really want to add that to the GUI. I'm just not sure how to pull them yet from that site. I don't have a lot of experience monitoring pin states.
Got it.
So my recollection, Randy, correct me if this is wrong, is that you can't get pin states unless you have a rather old Iridium. So that's not even a thing for most teams.
Oh, that's right.
On the other hand, we have an old one, and so we can see pin states. And Jesse says he's trying to get that sort of information onto this screen. But if you can't get pin states, then that's not going to help other people.
I'd like to have it there just in case anybody happens to have an old unit. So I'll be working on that.
I have a former student who's working on the pin state status right now. It has to do with how the database here was designed. There was an assumption made on the length of the IMEI number and what I guess what the ranges could be, and we've exceeded those ranges, so it's an overflow issue, which sounds really easy to fix, but it's not, because we have all this old data that now has to be converted into whatever new format she comes up with. So we'll keep you posted on all of that.
That'd be helpful.
The 2017 modems do get that. And you can probably talk to NAL and have the packet sent directly to you too, and strip the data out that way if you prefer.
That's true. That's probably the easiest way to go about it.
I think Mary in Maryland, I think her students have attempted that or are doing it. Maybe she can confirm that.
It's great to know.
I have a question for you, Jesse. On the lower right-hand side, it shows altitude and ascent rate in rather small print. But then the distance of 6,600 miles. It's like, what in the world is 6,600 miles from here?
That's
or from New Mexico.
Yeah, so the payload, it thinks the payload's in New Mexico, of course, and the ground station is still at its default location of 00, which is off the coast of Africa, just the intersection of the equator and the prime meridian, so pretty far away. But if I were to put it somewhere close to Minneapolis, like just approximating, what do we got, like 44 by minus 92, I think.
45 minus 93, but who's
45
counting?
minus 93, yeah. So something like that. Then you get what is approximately the distance from here to New Mexico, just ballpark, distance downrange. Yeah.
Jesse, I would like to commend you. This software looks incredible.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. You've taken a ton of input and put it into a nicely displayed GUI for everyone to use. I like the RFD. If you had the RFD antenna on the same tracker as the Ubiquiti dish, it would track the balloon automatically with the RFD dish. There's some mechanics there that you would need to do that. Having APRS, I think, is good. We heard at Burke that APRS got overloaded during the eclipse, so I think having all of those options is really a cool thing. So nice job.
Thanks so much.
So Mary jumped in the chat asking Randy to repeat your question for Maryland.
Yeah, Mary, didn't you have your Iridium data sent to a local address IP that you're able to scrape the data off for that, like position and altitude and that sort of thing?
I honestly do not know, but I will check with my students and see if that is something that we've done. And then just to confirm something you said earlier, Randy, I am going to be calling NAL and see what sort of service we might get on Eclipse Day.
Yeah, that
But
sounds
yeah, I'll
great.
get back to you on that.
Yeah, the lat long and altitude and all that, I know you can scrape as well as the pin states.
Gotcha.
Sorry, you can have, I think it's up to 3 different IPs, or maybe it's 5 or 6. Currently, we're sending to 2 different IPs here. So there's IP available. I will tell you that your school is going to scream at you for doing that, because they like firewalls and they sure as heck don't want anybody streaming something that they can't control. So be aware it's a long process to get through all of that.
So thank you, Randy. Thank you, Jesse. We may have to call it a day. I actually have another meeting that I have to get to, and I can't exactly leave here because I'm hosting it, but hopefully this has been interesting to people and helpful. And if for no other reason, you know who to talk to.
All for attending.
Thank you, guys.
This was great. See you next time.
Okay, we'll get a recording of this posted somewhere.
Yep.
I guess no real slides to show, but a recording posted somewhere. On the other hand, Randy, I'm looking forward, unless you've already sent them to Susie, your slides from the other day.
I have not sent those yet. I've had too many fires to put out.
No problem. I'll get Ashton to send his as well.
Yep, thank you.
Bye-bye, everybody. Have a good day.
Very helpful.